Hello and welcome to MC Tech Talk with Betsy and Kit. With all the technology we use in education, we thought it would be a great idea to share some tech tidbits and hacks that will help make your use of technology more efficient and meaningful.
You can find all of our episodes on our YouTube channel, MC Tech Talk, so make sure to like and subscribe. We'll be sharing our screens during the session as we walk you through the different tools. So if you're listening on the go, you can go back and view the recording to see what's going on.
Without further ado, let's jump into today's topic. Hello, MC Tech Talk friends. This is Kit
And Betsy.
Coming at you from the Monroe County ISD. Thank you for joining us today.
On today's episode, we'll be talking about mental health and digital resources that are out there to help and support our students and our families.
So without further ado, let's jump into today's topic, all about digital mental health.
We are so excited to welcome our guest, Margot Licklack from the mental health team at the Monroe County ISD.
Margot, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your role here at the ISD?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm a mom of three. I have a 7-year-old, a 2.5-year-old, and an 8-month-old, which is crazy. I love watching TV and I love reading. But professionally, I've worked at the ISD this is my 4th year in this role as the coordinator of the mental health team. Prior to that, I was a consultant for a year. And on our mental health team, we provide therapy to kids in schools with mild to moderate mental health diagnoses. But we also do a lot of professional development for our teachers, for our administration, and we provide support and training in the crisis protocols that we have in our county. So if a child is having a crisis of harming themselves or having even a plan to or harming others, we train and help carry out those assessments. Prior to working here at the ISD, I worked at our local community mental health agency for 6 years in a variety of roles in our children and family department. And I'm trained in 2 evidence-based practices, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy and EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy.
Awesome. I hear a lot about EMDR lately. That's good.
It's hot. It's
cool.
really good. It's
hot new therapy. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Well, yeah, thank you very much for coming on today.
Yes, absolutely. So we know that our mental health is important. And so, Margot, what can you tell us about our mental health, like in our everyday lives and how that applies to all of us, really?
I think it speaks to the shirt I'm wearing today. The shirt I'm wearing says mental health is health. And I didn't really plan that, but it's so true. Our mental health is just as vital as our physical health, and people are, all about their physical wellness, and they should be just as all about their mental wellness. Your mental health is a vital aspect of your overall well-being, really looking at how you handle yourself emotionally, psychologically, your social well-being, all of that impacts how we think, feel, and then is really what we do. Good mental health enables us to handle stress, relate to others, make good choices, and even cope with all the challenges that life throws at us. And when we actively care for our mental health and it's a priority and we serve it with intentionality, we see that we're more productive, we're able to navigate challenges easier, foster better relationships, and really also have improved physical health. So your mental health impacts everything and is equally as important as your physical health.
So getting students to understand that and teaching them those things as they're getting older will really help them in the long run.
And for teachers too, because I hear you saying, taking care of our mental health is something that we can actively choose to do. And did you say honor it or I think
I said serve it.
Maybe. Serve it. And I love that idea too, that it is something that we can serve. And then that positive mental health is going to increase our ability to cope. And yes. Especially too, I like how you tied it with physical health too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, so often I think, especially in the educational world, we throw around this idea of self-care, right? And that is this general idea of if you have good self-care, you'll have good mental health. But self-care and good mental health is not just taking a bubble bath once a month or going and doing one of your pleasurable hobbies once a month. It has to be done with intention and with consistency. And if you don't do that, a bubble bath is a bubble bath. That's nice in that
Mhm.
moment. That's not going to have any long-lasting impact on your mental health.
Or that pint of ice cream is that you
Yeah.
called self-care. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Did not serve our mental health. Yeah, in that way. Oh, awesome. Well, yeah, that's very cool. I definitely appreciate a greater insight too into like mental health and how we can take care of it. What do you think? So obviously, like, this is a tech talk podcast. What do you think like are some good resources or some places where we could go to get more information, like using the internet, like good websites and stuff like that we could go to?
Yeah. So as a social worker, we get asked for referrals all the time. I need resources. One of my favorite all-time resources is the Monroe Family Resource Guide, and that is put together through the Great Start Collaborative here at the ISD in partnership with many community partners, and it's all listed on their resource guide. But I think it's incredibly user-friendly. It's family-focused.
Yeah.
There's a number of resources in there because, while your mental health is so important, you also have to take care of your basic needs.
Yeah.
And this touches on all of those basic needs.
I can't tell you enough how much, the Family Resource Guide is written, is sponsored by and written by a team of people, but that team is led by the Great Start Collaborative.
Mhm.
Shout out GSC, who are our very first guests on this
Yeah.
podcast. That's Bridget and Jen have a big hand in that. And then Margot, you as well. They, so that one in particular, I got to tell you, like, we hand that out to families a lot. Like, we really do, as they say, like, lean into that because it's huge for Monroe County residents, families. Yeah.
It's definitely one that we provide. We have a network of general education social workers and special education social workers in the county, and it's one that we make sure is readily available and updated for them quite often. Yep. It's an important one. Another one that is specific just to mental health, behavioral health resources is the Monroe Mental Health Resource Guide that is put forward by ProMedica. And in there, it is much more specific, as the name says, to mental health resources. So when somebody is looking more specifically for those, this is the guide that I hand out. And there's also, they have print versions and electronic versions available.
I love that book. I do like the print one. Yeah, They do it snazzy.
They do. So that one just has a plethora of resources that, based off of your insurance or your diagnosis, where might be some places that you want to go.
So these are clinical care providers in this one.
Mm-hmm. So another one of my favorites is the Monroe County Substance Use Disorder Resource Guide. And this one was put forward by Catholic Charities of Southeast Michigan, along with other community partners that are listed in the resource guide. But it really is a comprehensive guide for everything substance use treatment related, which I think is a gem to have because sometimes it's hard to dig around and find those specific resources. So this is one that is super important as well. And the amount of times that somebody might have a co-occurring disorder, so mental health along with a substance use disorder, it speaks to that as well.
That's a good point.
And then the final one that I have listed is the Where to Turn Guide. And this one comes out of the Information Center. This one really does include Monroe County resources, but also like what some people call downriver resources. Southeast Michigan. It's a larger area, a larger net, and it has every resource you could think of under the sun.
Auto repair, legal,
everything.
A lot of stuff in that one too. I do like the Information Center out of not Canton. Taylor, I think they are up there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just a wealth of information. So if you need it, it's probably in there.
Awesome. Okay. Well, those all sound like really good, like resources. And how would our listeners get to those? We have those linked somewhere, right, Betsy?
Yes. So those will be linked in the show notes, like we did with our last episode. There'll be a link there that you can go to with a list of links and resources that you can click on.
Awesome. So in that list, I think we might have a link for you guys to a YouTube channel called Hey Bear. So there's also some good websites that we can talk about. Hey Bear, the YouTube channel it focuses on like sensory stimulation. So it's going to be like really like dulcet tones and some kind of new age vibes. I want to say it's almost like infant toddler oriented, but definitely
Animation,
the
music.
littles, yes. And so it's all very, very approachable, kind of soothing, I think is the primary intent behind that one, with some like nursery rhymes and stuff like that. So that one's popular in the world of parents these days.
And then another one, just for some background noise. I know sometimes it helps just to kind of calm you if you like rainy noises
Yeah.
or rainy days, to kind of have that in the background. So as you're working, it's just kind of taking those other thoughts away. And it's just rainymood.com. You hit the play button and it'll just play rain in the background. So
Yeah.
it's just relaxing and kind of get you into a little light mood.
Into a mood.
Being out in nature is one of the best things you can do for your mental health. So if we need to simulate it a little bit, I think that's a good idea.
Exactly.
One of the ones that we really like to use in therapy, but then also we encourage educators to use in their classrooms. This is really geared towards like lower L, maybe fourth grade. It's called Mind Yeti, and it's on YouTube. And they are short videos that are really aimed at mindfulness, that helps students feel calm and focused and connected. And so there's like a whole plethora of videos that they can choose from. And it's just this giant Yeti taking you through some mindfulness activities.
That's awesome. That's very cool. And I think, we're going to talk about some apps here in a second, but before we move away from the websites, I do encourage, teachers and people who are working with young children and stuff to spend a little bit of time fishing around for some of these channels specifically that have really good, I am thinking right now about Snoop Dogg's positive affirmations.
Yes.
That can be fun, and appropriate to share in a classroom or, in that in a therapy setting and things like that. Yeah. So definitely there are these things out there on the in that streaming world that would help support the mental health wellness and modeling that for kids. We also have a lot of these apps that we can use as well. The one that I'm partial to is the Insight Timer, and I also use the mindfulness app. But the purpose behind both of these is to practice mindfulness. So it helps set timers for it. It helps bring in different tones. Betsy, 100%. There's some different, on the mindfulness app, there's some backtrack with lots of different nature sounds. We can go anywhere in the world if we want to, and kind of just let that soothe us. And also to stimulate us as well, I think, in some different ways. That's what I like about the mindfulness app, is that it does kind of do different focused meditation practices, whereas the Insight Timer is more I don't know what the gongs are called, the different kinds of bowls and stuff like that, but it has those different kinds of tones that you can press, and they have different timing intervals for you to meditate, and so those apps are really useful, I think, for working on our mental health. I like those.
Yeah, I think mindfulness, just a little bit a note about it. Mindfulness is so important and such an undervalued tool, I think, to helping our mental health. Mindfulness is really about paying attention to the moment that you're in. So you're doing some sort of grounding exercise to anchor you in this moment, because so much of what we stress and worry about in our lives is coming from the past and is coming from the future, both of which we cannot control, right? We might be able to influence it a little bit, but we can't control the past, and we can't rewrite it, and we can't control the future. And so when you're finding yourself being overwhelmed in that moment, taking a second, grounding yourself, you're right here, right now. And those apps can help you really do that.
Okay, may I share with you my favorite that I learned from the mindfulness app? I don't have any dulcet tones of a babbling brook river behind us, but if you guys would, just for this one moment, it is, and I love it. And Margot, I couldn't have said it better. Obviously, you're the expert in that, but that is taking that moment to pause and be just in this moment that we're in right now. So one of my favorites, the mindfulness app, is the one that taught me this. But right now, both feet are placed flat on the floor. And I can, we feel the four corners of our feet. So I can feel 2 corners to my heels, and I can feel the corner from the ball of my foot, and I can feel the corner from the outside of my foot. And then I'm going to find my big toe, and I'm going to press my big toe into the ground as hard as I can on both feet. So I'll find my big toes and I'll push them as hard as I can. And then I'll find my pinky toes on both feet, and I'll press my pinky toes as far as I can into the ground, remembering that I have 4 points to my foot that's flat on the floor. So I'll go back and I'll find my big toes again, and I'll just press my big toes in, but then I'll find my second toe, and I'll try to press my second toe in. I didn't know I had a second toe until I got really mindful about it. Here's my middle toe. That's tougher even maybe sometimes. Anyway,
Yeah.
isn't that fun? Like,
It
so,
is.
and that mindfulness app, going through that practice of it, like that has turned into something that I pull in like every day into my life if I needed to center and bring back, you know,
we
some
live
of
in
that
such a
mindfulness.
fast-paced world, and you get caught in the day-to-day, let's get this done, let's do this, and just to stop and like think about where you are and be mindful of those thoughts it's essential.
My favorite way to describe mindfulness, it's this picture that I can send to you later, and you can link it in the show notes. But it is of a person and a dog on a walk, and there's little thought bubbles ahead above both of them. And in the person's, it's full of things, right? Because if we're taking a walk, we're thinking of all the things we need to do, all the things, you know, that you have to buy, whatever it might be. But the dog is literally just thinking, it has a picture of like the trees, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just paying
Looking
attention
at
to
what's
what
there.
it's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, if we could just be like that, if we could just focus on what we're actually doing, that'd be so helpful.
I think that this is an awesome conversation to be having too, but how these, here are some, like, these are tech tools. Like, this is stuff in our world of technology that I think has helped, like, kind of progress us outside of that mindfulness in many, many ways, right? And shooshed us forward. Shoosh is a word now. It shooshes us forward in the world, and it projects us into, like, you know, kind of faster. But here are some tools that we're talking about today that are helping even to bring it into a practice, right? A practice of mindfulness and a practice of serving that mental health.
Absolutely. So some of the ones that I use kind of on a daily basis are Headspace and Calm, which both of those do require paying for them. And so
a paid subscription for those.
Yes. Yeah. So that's just a note, but I will say they are both well worth the money. We use Calm every single night with my 7-year-old. He picks a sleep story. They have kid specific sleep stories, and it just helps get him in a place to begin to wind down, because sometimes it's really hard to turn off our brains. I think we all can relate to that. And then there's also Stop, Breathe, and Think, which is a specific one for younger children. So early childhood. It just helps. We know that their frontal lobe is not developed and won't be for many, many years now. But it is just a practice of how do we stop, breathe, and think before we do something. So kind of setting those foundations for you know, how do we handle stressful situations in life? And then the last one is Smiling Mind. And that's one that I really love because it actually has a really large piece for educators in there. So there's different lessons that educators could teach their students. And then there are home connections. So what can they do at home for that? Skill of the week, or whatever it might be. And that goes all the way up through late adolescence as well. So those are all really great ones.
And Smiling Mind and Stop, Breathe, and Think, those are apps.
Yes, those are apps
that we could find in the App Store. Okay, so those applications that you just shared with us, that is awesome. You guys can look for them. I think that Betsy might have shown you what a couple of them might look like in the App Store there. I definitely want to note too that different users are going to have different experiences when they go into their App Store or wherever you're going and downloading
depending
your
on
apps
the device
from.
you're using. Yep.
Yeah, so that's just something to mention. Is there a way that we can bring some of these tools into the classroom?
Yeah, so Smiling Mind is one of those ways you can use it. There's also something called Go Noodle, which is a really fun
I love Go Noodle.
brain break. Yep, that helps kids really just kind of loosen up in a fun, exploratory way. It helps fuel some of their energy and just gets them moving. And so our teachers definitely use Go Noodle as almost kind of like a reset sometimes if we can notice that kids are struggling. Go Noodle just helps bring about lessons on mental wellness and energy movement.
No, it's huge. And I know that teachers love it I love how you called it a reset. That is 100%, like, it's very useful in that regard. It's useful as a break when we have been inside learning all day. We know that the brain is wired for movement, right? And that movement helps get those endorphins out that kind of like help us to have, you know, all that feel good juice inside of our bodies anyway. So yeah, sometimes to move that body intentionally during that in that classroom setting and stuff, like, but to do it in a way that, again, we're modeling these skills, we're teaching that.
Yes. And another one that assume it's from the same company. It's called Go Zen. And that's more about that. It's not in our show notes right now, but we will add it. But it is more about that relaxation and mindfulness.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So I think also, so you mentioned too, a reset, but like I hear them use like brain breaks, right? Like referred to as a brain break. So basically like, we've just done a whole bunch of learning, or maybe we've just like capped a topic for that day and that kind of thing. So we could move on into another topic, into or out of, a transition through our daily routine, that kind
Getting
of thing.
ready for the school day, wrapping up the school day, getting them in that mindset to be set home, and then just breaks throughout the school day. The brain breaks that's linked is actually brainbreaks.com with a hyphen in there. And we'll link that in the show notes, but it's just 3 to 5 minute web-based games, videos, resource links, things, like real short things that you can raise awareness and inspire kids to take action in. So just some more additional activities to do with them.
Yeah, that's awesome that there's one that's called Brain Breaks. Yeah. These are fantastic too. I do want to mention, like this opportunity for our class as a whole, or whoever we're working with, to come together. Even I think it's community building, right? And like a sense of sort of like the shared experience as a large group to kind of have that positive, physical experience, musical experience, like whatever it is.
Yeah. When we
Meditative.
look at supporting mental health in schools, we really look at it on like a tiered intervention. So like your tier 1, your universal strategies, that is your brain breaks. That's your go noodle. That's anything that is universal and the beneficial for all, right? We're establishing these norms. A piece of that is social emotional learning, which we'll talk about in a second. But those tier 2 then might be your more targeted groups, where you're providing more group intervention. And then your third tier is your individual one-on-one kind of therapy. So I can't stress enough how important tier 1 activities are, because those meet the masses, right? Those set the stage for so many kids. And if we can help them all have a better base foundation of mental health, the better they're all going to be in the long run.
And I think we did have it. I went hacksaw at our script because we had all kinds of things to talk about and to say for sure. It's universal design instruction, UDI, yes. Right? Is what we're kind of talking about here. And basically like the thing that meets the need of one might meet the need of all. Yes. And so we're going to provide these things that may meet the needs of all. That's tier 1 intervention. Yeah, that's awesome. Very cool.
Yeah. I actually just did some sessions on UDL and enhancing student instruction, and that whole idea of helping all students.
Yeah. Yeah. Universal design learning. Yes. Very cool. So, and you mentioned too about how, so those are the intervention supports, and that's the structure that kind of helps with that social emotional learning, right? The SEL. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So SEL stands for social emotional learning, and it's really the process through all people, young adults, little kids, acquire and apply knowledge, skills, and attitudes that really help develop healthy identities, your ability to achieve and set personal goals, your ability to feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. So it's really, SEL is all about how do we become a good human being?
Yeah, self and others, right?
Yes.
Like how I view myself, how do I view others, how do I interact with others? Yeah, feel about them.
Absolutely. So having a solid foundation of those SEL skills where we can interact with others in an appropriate and healthy manner, that combined with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So if we think of that pyramid where we have like those basic needs at the bottom, shelter, food, security, and then we kind of go up. At the very tip top is academic learning, and your ability to like kind of think through hard things. And so if we're able to not only meet the basic needs of our students, but also teach them these imperative social skills, we are setting them up to be able to achieve that very top academic learning.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that sometimes schools are the stopgap for our community, that when our community is lacking in some way, shape, or form of a resource, let's say there's food insecurity or unstable housing, or really just a lack of a consistent caregiver, our schools are the ones that have to fill that gap for kids, right? Yeah. It needs to be filled somewhere. Yeah. And schools are set up to do it beautifully. It's taxing to the school, environment and to the professionals that work there, but it is so crucially needed for the betterment of our community.
which is a big part. Like I'm a home visitor,
Yeah.
right, with the early on program because of that piece of it, right?
Yes.
It's that idea of like helping support, again, the triangle of those basic needs. You cannot get higher onto that triangle without meeting those, helping to be a stopgap for some of those.
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And some people will say, oh, teaching somebody to be a kind human, like, isn't that a parent's responsibility? And it absolutely 100% is. But if your parent didn't have a good role model of how do we handle conflict in a healthy manner or show empathy to others, how is that parent going to teach their child that if they don't know it themselves? And so it is important that the school teaches just those baseline foundational skills of how do we interact with others. And that's really where SEL merges with Maslow to get to academic learning to make like overall healthier human beings, right? And I think that's what we all want. We want healthy, productive human beings.
Yeah, definitely 100%. And I think, again, I'm coming from like the early childhood realm, and a big piece of that edict is to kind of like meet them where they're at and at their level. And that's why like the home becomes really important, and bringing the caregivers and parents and extended family and stuff like that into this process of learning, early learning, and especially intervention, as early as possible, because basically like that's self-actualization piece there at the top of that Maslow's pyramid. You cannot get, all the way to that top and that higher order critical thinking, kind of state unless all of those other levels have been met. And a big part of them is self-actualization too. Like, how do I feel about myself? Right. Yeah. So, yeah.
Very good. So with that in mind, are there programs then, Margot, out there that can help us teach SEL so that they can become those adults that have that strong social and emotional competence as they're getting older and as, when they're in their adult stage, to help then others?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a plethora of programs out there that can help us do that. I think it's really important. A lot of the SEL programs that are out there right now are based off of the 5 CASEL competencies of social emotional learning. And those 5 competencies of, I'm going to forget some, but self-awareness, self-management, relationship skills, 2 more. But all 5 of those really are the basis for all SEL curriculum. So in our county, there's a number of SEL programs that use. Some use Trails to Wellness, some use Second Step, some use Courageous Classroom, and others use Mind Up. They're all various different ways of teaching the same thing, right? Of how do we help kids identify how they can interact with others, have effective communication, model empathy, and really have good emotional regulation. And what I like about the SEL programs is that they really structure them. They provide lesson plans, curriculum, activities, and resources. Almost, I believe all of those have a home connection. So if this is something that we're teaching in school, this is what we send home so our parents can be aware and also highlight that for their students or for their children in their home. And it provides, really age-based learning. So SEL curriculum can be and is K-12, right? We can begin it really, well, even before that. I'm familiar with K-12, but even before that, right, we can begin it with really young people. And then as they grow and develop, they dive deeper into these concepts and, explore in a new way. And so there are the 5. I had them written down somewhere.
I scrolled up just a little bit, guys.
Self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. I was close on some of those.
No, you got it, man. You nailed it. I'm impressed.
So it's really important, like, not only can our teachers help teach this to our students, but parents really are the main teachers of this. We model this every day.
They are the parents are their kids' first teacher, right? So I love that you're talking too about this, like wrapping this into the home as well.
But like you said earlier, like parents sometimes don't have those resources or they don't know
didn't have the models,
what to say or
don't have the language.
So being able to make that connection at home and giving them those resources will be a big help.
Yes, exactly. So really as a parent, if you're thinking like, how do I do this for my kids? Really bringing in, I like to think of it as like So I have a 7-year-old and a 2.5-year-old, and they're not that close in age, but they bicker, right? And they'll fight over, some sort of toy or something. I could go in and just manage the situation, right? I could absolutely go in and say, no, you must give this to your sister. You must give this to your brother. But what is that going to teach them? Not a whole lot, right? It's just me coming in and managing. But if I play like what I call like referee, if I say, oh, and I do like a play-by-play, I see that you want what your brother has. And it looks like to me your brother is in the middle of a game. I wonder what we should do, right? Like that helps that child start to think about what can I do in order to like address the situation. Can I say, hey, could I have it when you're done with that level, or whatever it might be? So instead of just going in and handling things, like helping walk your child through the steps that they would take to eventually learn to handle it themselves. By doing that with like any situation, whether it's they're emotionally upset because their feelings got hurt from their friend, they want a toy, whatever it might be, like you can start to teach those foundational skills, and you model it all the time without even knowing it.
Well, and when you shut down their thinking by just going in and telling them what it's going to be, then they don't get to learn how to think through that process.
Right.
Yeah. I love that you said like shut them down, because this is like the opposite of this. And Margot, thank you very much for that beautiful modeling, that interaction, that exchange at home. Basically, like it was narration, so she's providing a lot of the vocabulary and sort of like a lot of description. So when we're talking about building self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision making, relationship skills, and social awareness, that's like say the name of the method, or the castle. Okay, so you're saying that all of the social emotional learning curricula that you had mentioned earlier, like those are built off of these principles.
5 competencies.
Got it. When children, that's not intrinsic. Like, so we basically are pointing out self and others to a child, right? And then we're building that competency by saying, okay, in a social situation, did you notice how he's crying now?
Right.
So in my world too, with the little, so 0 to 3 specifically, right? Naming, even just naming the feeling, the feeling.
And we're empowering them to think of different solutions and multiple solutions. There's not one solution to what's going on. And for them to be able to make it to those different realizations is a big step for them.
And when we think about building empathy, we're not just like born with empathy, right? Like we have to learn how to have it for others. And so often, okay, so my 2.5-year-old might go up and just take a toy right from my 7-year-old, because they're 2.5. They don't know how to share yet. Literally, I got told at the daycare yesterday, oh, she had a hard day sharing. And so I was trying to work through it with her at home. I said, so what do we do if a friend, has a toy we want? And she literally said, just take it. I was like, no, that's not what we talked about. But anyway, if something happens where my 2.5-year-old makes my 7-year-old upset and he starts crying, right? Let's say she hit him or took a toy that he had and he wanted. Instead of me saying, go apologize to your brother, because she doesn't know what she's sorry for. She's 2.5. She has no idea. I can say, wow, it looks like your brother's crying because you took his toy. I wonder what we can do to make our brother feel better, right? Like by giving them that opportunity to think it through and to identify that your action had an effect on another person. What can we do to help that other person? That's building empathy, instead of just forcing an apology that they don't even know what they're apologizing for and doesn't teach them anything.
I think that is one of the fastest ways to squash it, isn't it? Is by saying to a child, like in any setting, home or school or whatever, like, here's what you're going to go do to fix this. Like, here's, you know what I mean? Yeah.
And they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. No. So we're trying to help them build those skills 100%. So that was amazing. Yeah. Thank you very much for all of that insight into SEL, right? Social emotional learning. And we talked about we talked about something last week or last episode that might help parents learn more about social emotional learning.
So one of the resources we shared on our last episode was Common Sense Media, which offers reviews and ratings for media and technology. And they've developed an entire page on SEL in digital life. So this will help support students' social and emotional learning as they're navigating the digital world. We know that all of our kids nowadays come in on the internet, on digital platforms, on different devices. Like, they're growing up with these.
They're being raised on it.
Yes, exactly. So by going to Common Sense Media, going to their SEL and Digital Life Resource Center, it's actually broken down into grade bands, which is really helpful for parents and educators alike to go in and choose what grade they're focused on. And then they have some additional resources, guides, movies to help you teach SEL in the classroom, family engagement activities. So it really is a well-rounded resource.
Yeah, that's
on
very
here.
cool. That sounds like that would be really helpful to kind of like explore SEL more and
Yes,
like understand
absolutely,
it better. Yeah. Yeah.
Especially in that realm of the digital world.
100%. So in the realm of that digital world, Margot, what are your thoughts on what you're seeing out there as far as like students' use in social media and emotional well-being?
Oh, man.
It's loaded, I know.
Yeah, that is a loaded question. I mean, the digital world has like undeniably altered how students interact, communicate, navigate social relationships, right? Like it is a total different world than the world that we grew up in. I think social media and just the internet in general have so much pros to it, so many wonderful things about it. There's also drawbacks to it. Obviously, some of the wonderful things is the ability for people to make connections with people and groups that they might not have been able to before, right? You're able to access so much information and people who live very different lives than you do. And you're able to find, I think, a place where you feel like you belong. And that belonging is such an important part of our mental health, right? We need that connection, that community, and social media helps you do that. You're able to stay connected no matter what, really. On some of the flip side of that, social media breeds like this whole culture of comparison. I'm going to post my best picture doing the most fun thing, wearing my cutest outfit, right? And I want to see how many likes I can get on that. And when you're scrolling and you see somebody else post a picture like that, we have what are called automatic negative thoughts, and that like might spark it for you, right? Mm-hmm. Then you kind of think, wow, maybe I'm so ugly, or I don't have the money to be able to do that, or I would never get that many likes. And those thoughts spiral into feelings, which spiral into behaviors. And so it can be this dark, twisty spiral that leads to comparing so much and feeling like you don't have enough. And also can lead to bullying, right? Like if you don't have enough, or you're picked on for whatever reason, bullying doesn't just stop at like the school doors, right? Or on the walk home, it follows you forever.
Yeah. Or you're bullying yourself.
Yes.
Or you're bullying yourself because you're caught in that compare and despair, kind of spiral. I like how you said that the culture of comparison, that it almost like the nature of social media kind of breeds that culture.
It does. Yeah. And cyberbullying is real and it is vicious. And it's impossible to escape. And so that has a direct impact on the mental health of adolescents and adults. It's also that constant exposure of being on devices leads to higher levels of stress and anxiety, difficulties in disconnecting. Mm-hmm. Even for adults who work, it's hard to like disconnect from your electronic device, right? Exactly. And so social media just leads to that constant screen time, which is not good for us. We need to unplug. We need to connect with nature. We need to be in this moment,
right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. The light from your screen, it marks your sleep. And you want to talk about mental health, you need to have good sleep to have good mental health. Yeah. So in so many ways, it's all interconnected.
It's interrupting dopamine reception, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think we talked about Cocomelon briefly on a previous episode or something of why that one is so popular, because it's like this instant hit of dopamine, like every time we're looking at that screen.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. Yeah. Well, and one of the things, like one point I wanted to make is that social media is like instant gratification. I post this picture and boom, I'm probably going to get a like within, 30 seconds, maybe. And so it really does limit some patience and resilience and like coping mechanisms. Mm-hmm. We are so used to just getting what we want when we want it. So while social media has good things with that connectivity, it's easy to find a community. You can even like in that community, like I know on TikTok, there are a lot of young people who share about their mental health struggles, and they share in a way that's really relatable to other adolescents, and it breeds that community of you're not alone, which is so vitally important. But there's also like the dark side of TikTok, where you can watch videos that are not at all appropriate or healthy.
Right. Or
Some
the
of
dark,
trends
or the
that start. And,
Yes.
and the darker side of that community too, because it's a wonderful thing, Margot. Like, I feel like I am going to play devil's advocate in this minute. Because really, like, it is belonging, right? We need to belong. We need to feel like we aren't othered, and we are, like, there's other people who are experiencing the thing that we experience, and that kind of thing. And then there's also, so social media is not an accurate representation of a sociological experience, because the algorithm, the app itself, the way that we function within the UI, like the user interface, like within the app itself, the gifting culture in a lot of the apps themselves and stuff like that. So sometimes, like, we're being directed to a lot of the communities by the application itself. Is that fair to say? Yeah.
And sometimes those communities, you definitely have to be a conscious user, right?
Yeah.
You have to pay attention to the communities that you're driven to, the information that they share in
Does
those
my
communities.
FYP only look like one thing?
Right.
Do I only see the same thing, like, over and over again? Or am I hearing the same taglines from the same users and the same?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so while, yes, it can help you create a community where you feel like you belong and you're not alone, it can also, you don't want it to be, I think you used the word earlier, an echo chamber of your thoughts and your feelings, because we do need different perspectives to be able to function. It's also really important. I think it can be a good information share. So at the same time that it can share misinformation, social media can also share accurate information.
It is. I think that this is just highlighting the whole conversation here, is that this is a double-edged sword that we're dealing with here. And it's a sword that everybody carries now. It's here to stay. Like, we have it, right? So we can definitely kind of like teach, model, and help understand better how to use it and think more critically while using it, to use it more intentionally, purposefully, practically.
Right. And pay attention to how that use impacts your thoughts, your feelings, and your behavior, right? What impact does that have on my mental health? If we always talk about just mindful music in general, right? Like, if you're feeling sad, sometimes you turn on a sad song. Does that sad song, like, deepen your sadness? And is that what you want in that moment? Or are we looking to try to, like, get out of the funk that we're in? If we want to get out of the funk, we probably need to listen to different music. Same thing goes for social media. What are you feeding in? What are you taking in? What impact does that have on your mental health? One thing that we like to share is, like, on TikTok, there's a ton of therapists out there and psychiatrists and psychologists that share a lot of really helpful information about mental health and mental health diagnoses. And sometimes they're able to explain and share that information in a way that's really relatable and understandable for adolescents. So, like, just recently I did a therapy session with a adolescent in high school, and we were talking a lot about attachment theory, which is a hard kind of concept to understand. It's not very concrete. And so I looked up a bunch of different attachment theory TikToks and shared them with her. And they provided a really great base for us to have conversation around, like, what are her parents' attachment styles? How do they impact her and her behavior and her relationships with others? And I was able to do that in a way that I wouldn't without social media, right? I could have, like, read her the definition and tried to make it relatable, but we have the ability to share some of that information, from those social media platforms. But again, you have to be a smart user and make sure that that information is accurate information. And that's why it's vital that parents and schools have all sorts of, different programs that they run on their Chromebooks, to make sure that we're not accessing things we shouldn't be accessing. But parents need to be mindful and help teach their children how to be critical consumers of social media and, like, information.
I think our teachers can too, as well, because our teachers are people too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And definitely, like, they have those, they have a lot of those apps themselves. So even just being a little bit sort of, like, doing some of that, like, description or that narration or some of the modeling, like, talking about how to use them appropriately, which ones I don't use because I don't like. I'm not going to go on Snapchat, because Snapchat, is, like, for shady dealings and something like that. Like, again, in an age appropriate way, giving a child that context of, what I mean, like, that this is why, this platform might not be the best, or, that kind of thing.
My kids are used to, and they will tell you, don't give out personal information. Who are you
How
talking
to use
to?
them.
What are you
Yes.
on? What are you
How
doing?
to
I
use
mean,
them.
I'm constantly like talking to them about those different things.
So you have the best dialogue with them. It's a conversation that you can have with them as well, not like at them and tell them, you know what I mean? But I think too, then being very, very present and like present in their use.
Yes.
I think sometimes parents are a little bit, can tend to be absent from, that use of social media. So parents specifically just being more present in it and having that kind of courage to have those kinds of conversations and use these kinds of tools to kind of help inform some of those.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, you bring up Snapchat, which I think, Joan, just for a quick note, I love Snapchat because it's the way that like I connect to my sister-in-law in Iowa, and we share pictures of our kids back and forth super easily, right? But I also know that on Snapchat, it's very easy for random people to find young children and try to sell them drugs on Snapchat. And so it's so important that as a parent, like you said, you are present and you're looking and you're reviewing, and that you know how to use that app better than your kid knows how to use that app.
Oh, that's such a hot tip, isn't it? That's such a hot tip.
So they know all the know all the tricks. So you gotta be smarter.
Yeah. But then some of these tools again that we've talked about today, and I keep thinking about our previous episode as well with the community and family outreach and stuff like that. Like some of these tools that we're talking about here on this podcast can help inform educators, parents, people who are going to be using these tools and helping children learn how to use them appropriately.
Absolutely.
So a piece of social media I think that is helpful is Facebook groups. I think we talked about a little bit, you might be directed somewhere based off of like your algorithms and things. And some Facebook groups can be really helpful and help find that community for parents themselves. But some of them also might be a little bit unhelpful.
Yeah.
So just, as a parent, also just being mindful of your own social media consumption, not just the consumption of your child.
I really love how you were talking too about like, how is it making me feel? Like I'm thinking about the people who belong to a really, particularly problematic like Facebook group and stuff. And they talk about it a lot and how they're upset about it and that kind of thing. I'm like, I wonder if that group's a good place for you.
Right,
I wonder if there's a good group out there,
Yeah. But also, on that same vein, like social media is also a place where we can be connected to our community resources. And so one in particular, I know that it sounds like you guys have referenced before in the podcast that's really important is Gabby's Ladder Grief Center. And their most up-to-date information is found on their Facebook group or Facebook page.
Yeah, and some of these community outreach organizations, some of these like definitely powerful partners in the community that like, again, educators, families would want to use, they only have a presence on, Facebook or whatever, what have you and stuff like that. Yeah. So definitely like using it as a place to kind of help find some of those things. And then, some of those groups that can be particularly helpful. I think that there's probably a plethora of groups that might be mindfulness or meditative or, that kind of thing as well. Yeah.
There's a ton.
Yeah. There's a lot of good resources out there. It's just a matter of finding them and being able to use them.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. So definitely, Margot, thank you very much for everything that you shared with us today. You gave us a lot of different things to websites, apps to use, a lot of really, really good insight into mental health. Yeah, topics. Yeah. So thank you very much for coming on today.
You're so welcome. Thank you guys for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you again so much for joining us for today's MC Tech Talk. We want to give a big thank you to Margot Licklack from the Monroe County ISD's mental health team for being with us and for sharing her expertise and resources.
On today's episode, we talked about the importance of our mental health, social emotional learning, brain breaks, and apps that you can use, and websites from different mental health teams in Monroe County that are out there for you at home and at school. And we hope these resources will be helpful to educators, students, and families.
So please join us next time to learn more about assistive technology tools.
Thank you for listening to this episode of MC Tech Talk with Betsy and Kit. If you would like to ask any questions about anything from today's episode, click the link in the description to fill out the Google form.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check back next month for our next episode of MC Tech Talk. You can find our flyer for future episodes linked in the show notes below.
Thanks again. We'll see you next time.